everybody. Well, people often refer to defence as the sort of 800-pound gorilla in the room, and we have got an 800-pound panel for you here and virtually. We're going to try and sort of smash our way through some...
Not sure
I'm
that's
sorry.
a compliment. Maybe, yeah.
I didn't think that one through, did I? That was a bit... we're going to try and move through this really, quickly and get straight to some of the really interesting questions. But we've got the perfect panel to do that for you today. And what we're really wanting to unpick is what are we seeing in the military transformation space? What's happening as previously emerging technologies are maturing, and we're starting to see the priority be not just on the technologies themselves, but on fast fielding and fast adaptation. What does this mean for how we deal with new actors? How do we think about supply chains, industrial bases and technology bases as fundamental inputs to capability? I'm going to open actually by going to the Vice Minister that we have virtually. A really important perspective from Lithuania, of course, and particularly a really interesting conceptualisation of resilience and whole of nation resilience. Vice Minister, may I throw to you?
Good noon, Sydney. It's a great privilege and honor, to join you. I think it's a really good start because in Lithuania, as you might know, it's really early morning and we are here early birds, so it's already a good sign, I would say, about our preparedness, and readiness. So thank you so much. It's a really honor to join you and to participate in such a privileged dialogue known really broadly. And talking about total defense, I would say, and preparedness, it's already for a long time at the heart of our defense policy. This constitutes, one of the key pillars of Lithuanian strategy. And this is how we plan to deter and defend if needed. What actually key elements, what we do right now, seeing what's happening around us, seeing challenges and threats. So first and foremost, of course, it's strengthen our defense and significantly boost our budgets. And I'm happy that already right now we have historical defense budget. It's beyond 3%, and that's already among political parties and society agree that's a new bottom, right? Not 2%, but 3%. It's a new key benchmark for us. Second, what we do, being a small country, we definitely invest into our partnerships and in our alliances, and trying to create also resiliency by avoiding economic, energetic, political, technological dependencies. So to make sure that at some stage that doesn't tie our strategic decisions and our hands. Third, and I think that's very much obvious, and I will be not new here, that we are very closely monitor what's going on in Ukraine, trying to draw lessons and actually tirelessly, and continuously and robustly continue to supporting Ukraine and do whatever we can, because from our understanding, that's our war, and we started this resolute support not only in 2022, but when the first war outbreak happened back in 2014. And in Lithuania, I think equally as a national defense, it's a top priority and will continue to be so. Following what's happening there, we all see what decisive role plays industry, right, on both sides, and technology. Because in Russia, we see that it's already a wartime economy, and despite any sanctions and any technological export restrictions on our side, they are adapting very fast. So from our perspective, Ukraine's ability to harness defense technology will be critically for continuously, safeguarding sovereignty and ensuring that the security of the rest of the Europe and beyond. Actually, that was very much recognized here as well in Lithuania, that industry and technology should become integral and separatable part of defense capacity. And we can discuss in more depth, that later. We know what Russians can do with their ability to mass forces against us. If with conventional things, our geography matters very, very much, in digital and cyberspace, I think that's something different when the country is not so much dependent on geography, but on the resilience, preparedness, exactly what we are discussing today. You are well aware of what Russians did in Ukraine in digital space. They effectively integrated, for a long time already, cyber operations, information warfare, and electronic warfare in general into their doctrine. And Lithuania that experiences for already a long time. While preparing ourselves, we are making assumption that it will be integral, part of their military strategy if they would decide to do anything against us, against Western countries. And in Ukraine, they targeted critical infrastructure, including, power grids, communication networks, financial systems. They are also spreading disinformation right now. They are conducting already, I would say, and maturing non-kinetic operations throughout the whole Europe to diminish our will to continue support Ukraine. So what does it mean? It means that, digital has brought unprecedented opportunities on the one hand in defense, but on the other hand also introduced new vulnerabilities to us. And cyber attacks, data breaches, and manipulation of information have become powerful weapons, and not only by states, but also by states and the proxies they are using every day against us. So what we should do about that? We definitely need to protect our networks, infrastructure, and data, equally as we protect our physical borders. And digital defense requires agility, innovation, and strategic alliances, right? Lithuania, as a small country, very much trying to apply forward-thinking approach and invest into our total defense concepts, into whole of society, whole of the government concepts, and not only by arranging institutional mechanisms, creating laws, but also investing into public awareness, because that's, I think, a keyword and critical thing while we are thinking about the whole total defense and whole of the nation preparations. And second, what we do, we as at the very beginning, I underlined, we build our strategic partnerships, and that's not something unique, that we are very active also, not only within Europe, within NATO, within European Union, but also trying to establish as much as possible ties with their Indo-Pacific, partners and allies, and because we see that's the only way we can all together to strengthen our supply chains, to ensure technological defense interoperability, and align our security policies. So I think I will stop here, and we can take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a really comprehensive response, and I love the way that you put the the defence aspects into that whole of nation and the whole of society kind of approach of total defence and your concept of resilience. That's really important, and like you said, particularly for smaller nations who need to consider this issue of mass and think about how to leverage technology. It's a particularly pertinent question. Abe, it's not just small countries though. Every country is thinking about technology and how to deploy it most effectively and efficiently, how to kind of use it to change the equation, so to speak. You've been in this space for a while. What technologies are standing out to you as having some of the greatest military application in whatever time sort of horizon you want to talk about? What's emerging as most promising from your perspective?
Sure. Thanks, Beck, and thank you for inviting me here. I think in terms of the technologies that are having the greatest effect, there's traditional military capabilities that we are fairly well practiced at building, right? And because of that, they don't get as much attention. But I do think that they're quite critical in terms of aircraft, submarines, planes, ships at sea, et cetera. Even into space and cyberspace, I feel like we have a good sense of those things. I think in terms of emerging technologies, the technologies that people are talking about here today and yesterday in terms of AI, drones, robots, all of that I think is what gets the most attention because they're so new and because they're so integrated into the modern battle space that we're seeing in Ukraine, where these battlefields see the wholesale integration of these technologies, right? And they're having a real effect. And there's a reason why so many of our adversaries are investing in them, right? That they're effective, they're attritable, and they're cheap, right? And you can evolve them and very quickly. To the point where I think there's a phrase that comes out of Silicon Valley a lot. You hear in that space, adapt or die. And I think it has very literal connotations in terms of the US space, both in terms of our tactics and capabilities to build the capabilities that we need and how to employ them, but also up to the strategic level. And this is where Eric Schmidt was talking about the need for us to have that innovation advantages and be able to build the systems necessary to make sure that our systems, that our capabilities, that our techniques, tactics and procedures can evolve over time to make sure that we're staying ahead because these things evolve so quickly. So in terms of the technologies that I'm looking at, it's not just the technologies themselves about AI and quantum and all of those things and hypersonics that I think are very important. But I think more importantly is how are we adapting our forces to employ them, our tactics to employ them? Are we thinking about their implications for deterrence and strategic dynamics? And then at a systematic level, how are we establishing the industrial bases that are necessary, the technology bases that are necessary in order to produce them at the speed of warfare, to produce them at scale, and to adapt them at the speed necessary to maintain our advantages as our adversaries adapt to what we're doing. And that to me is the focus, not just the technologies themselves, but the systems that we're putting in place in order to support them. Share technologies in a way that, as Hugh was talking before, we get capabilities that are better than what we'd be able to do on our own. I think combining those reduced barriers in the regulatory space and engaging more with private equity, I think is creating that system, at least in the United States, so that those sorts of investments, those sorts of cooperation within industry is not subject to the long timelines of acquisition, procurement, sustainment that you get from Congress and for the bureaucracy that I know and love in the Department of Defense.
And it lets you harness some of that goodness that James was talking about, actors that are really leaning in and wanting to help and wanting to be part of the solution. Yeah. James, again, back to you. What did Ukraine do for NATO in terms of change and being able to get after some of these processes?
Well, one thing that it has done, staying with my very positive mood this morning or afternoon, is actually, I think, it has had a very positive effect on the private sector. Until very recently, a lot of innovators, small companies and also big companies, leaned away from defense. Their staffs didn't want to get involved, CEOs didn't want to get involved because it was too mixed in terms of perspective. That's really changed, and it's changed very demonstrably. So when we put out this challenge, this first set of 5 challenges for Diana, we were expecting maybe 300-400 startups to apply. We got 1,380. And there is a clear recognition in the private sector very broadly that actually, you know what, we need to do this together. And that's really changed things for us. We try to facilitate that because for each of the technologies for which we are developing strategies or have developed strategies, we have also developed principles of responsible use. We have posted them online if anybody wants to see them. For example, the first principles of responsible use for biotech in our context, in a multilateral environment. That's never been agreed before. We have them, and we make them public, and that has given some comfort, I think, to the private sector about how their technologies will be used. So that's a good effect. The challenge we have is to move at speed. You talked about the processes. So one of the reasons that we created Diana, our DARPA, and our innovation fund outside of NATO was so that they could move quickly and not be held back by politics, meaning like the NATO ambassadors all debate what an investment should be in biotech, where they have absolutely no clue, and I don't either. But also so it doesn't get politicized. It has to be south, it has to be east, it has to be west. We have all of that. They're created outside, so they can move fast. But the problem is they don't affect the basic, powerful procedures that NATO has to set targets for all allies. That is still in the Jurassic Park era of innovation. And when we try to change those, the sort of hands of dead colonels reach out from the grave and clutch the defense planning process to their dead hearts, And I'm not actually exaggerating that much.
He's not.
It is huge resistance, and it's in my country too, and I know it's in other countries. Yeah. And there's reasons for that. Like it works for, as I said, it works for the big platforms, but we need to change things. So the challenge, but the big win, is to change the big procedures. So I asked some companies, how did you do it, for example, for developing generative AI? Moves super fast. So these big companies, IBM sized, let's say. And even they said we couldn't move fast enough with the procedures that we had. So they created standalone units with their own budgets, their own incentive structures. And for example, I think this is really fundamental for every government represented here, and that is risk. In Canada, if you take 6 swings and you succeed 3 times, which is unusually successful in this area, you are not rewarded for your 3 successes. You are punished for your 3 failures. You wasted taxpayers' money on 3 failures. Whereas in venture capital, 90% of your bets are going to disappear, 5% of them will break even, and if you can get 3% of it out of the 3% to really succeed, you did great. Yeah. And so we need to put in place, and this is doable, different risk incentives and rewards for bureaucrats who make decisions on acquisition of new technologies. That alone would make a fundamental difference. It is absolutely in the power of governments to do that. It's an easy win, but we are not yet there.
Interesting. Hugh, what would you add to that?
You just ticked over into the red zone, so I'll try to be quick. We're in minus territory now, so this is the clock that's now ticking backwards. So look, and for anybody who's really interested, international traffic and arms regulations, Australian defence officials know US systems pretty well. And just on that point, this has been the target of Australian defence reformers, this regime, for about 20, 30 years. And every effort at reform before this one has failed. And it's actually because of the Biden administration and people like Abe who are making the case inside their system that it actually implemented this time. So really big achievement. If we have another 30 minutes, I could explain what it will actually do, but it's a big issue. So look, we are in the collective defence business, right? We do not believe, and we have never believed, that we can defend Australia on our we have never really believed in the idea of a self-sufficient defence force or defence industry, defence capability system. That is to say, we must be self-reliant, but we are reliant within the context of our partnerships and our agreements and our allies and our treaties. That's how we effectively ensure the defence of Australia. But in an era where strategic competition has really returned with a vengeance, where power and ideology is much more contested and where technology has proliferated, and we don't necessarily have a key technological advantage. The challenge is, how do we actually operationalise those partnerships and those alliances such that they really become a genuine competitive advantage? James is exactly right. If you add up our technology sectors, our universities, our corporate capabilities, our economic strengths and the strengths of our political systems, absolutely. The problem is that historically we've relied on the fact that we've had an economic and technological advantage that now has dissipated, and I think that we now need to, the job is therefore to scale our cooperation much more effectively across those partnerships. So really make collective defence real. It doesn't mean that we hinge our sovereignty to other countries. No, what this means is actually we are more sovereign in and of ourselves because we have greater capabilities to defend ourselves as individual countries, but that crucially depends on our ability to scale our cooperation in key areas. Technology is one way we are going to do that. AUKUS is just one mechanism for us to do that, but as the Vice Minister has said, we need to replicate those kinds of mechanisms with other partners. When I was in Brussels last year, I was really struck at how NATO partners are thinking about exactly the same things. How do they mobilise new forms of capital? How do they tap into the fact that we have the largest share of investor capital in the world? You know, how do we change the minds in industry such that they're more willing to think about defence capability as an asset class that they're interested in? These are all questions that and these are all questions, by the way, that defy geography. There's a big debate around, if we cooperate with NATO, does that mean NATO has to come to the Indo-Pacific? Well, no, actually. There's a whole range of areas of cooperation that we could do with NATO and with our European partners, with our US partners, that are not really contingent on geography. And technology, of course, is one of those areas. So to me, this kind of ability to scale cooperation across allies and partners addresses some of the fundamental barriers that have bedeviled advanced capability in defence space in Australia, because we have great research and technology firms, we have terrific universities, we have a vibrant private sector, but we have a very, very small defence budget, relative, and we have a very, very small defence force. And so, an Australian firm or can come up with a terrific technology, but unless they're able to find external markets, it's not economic. You're not going to be able to get a company to survive just on the budget, on the business of the Australian Defence Force alone. And so really what I think, if we can operationalise our partnerships in this more effective way, we actually create an ecosystem, a sort of defence trade zone that allows us to scale that technology and those opportunities across multiple partners. That's if we get the design right. The design is hard, but we need to do it. And I think the other area that I'll just sort of leave you with is that we need to really figure out a much more effective division of labour. The idea that we all figure out, we all need solutions around autonomy, we all need solutions around long-range fires. The idea that we Australia, independently of the US, independently of NATO partners, figure out what is our solution to long-range strike. When instead what we should be doing is figuring out, okay, we all need long-range strike, we're all relying on similar supply chains, and we all want the same thing around about the same time. So let's figure out what the division of labour is. You know, what component parts is Australia going to produce? What component parts will NATO members produce? What parts will the US produce? And how do we operationalise that kind of arrangement? We do this the market does this through our free trade agreements in the economic and commerce space. We need to actually do it in the defence space more effectively. But it won't generate on its own. It won't self-generate because these things are obviously controlled. These are technologies that we need to prevent from proliferating. And so we need to create the mechanisms that do that. And that's the role of government. And I think this is the type of area that we really need to work on. It's an area of that our systems, we have the iron kernels. I haven't heard about the kernels, what was it?
The
dead kernels reaching from
From the grave.
From the grave, that's a good one. Our systems are the barriers to this type of project working. And it's not their fault, it's because we criminalise, actually, behaviour. And also because we have a system that politicises defence expenditure and says, yes, you should take risk, but then prosecutes and punishes failure.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And so we really need to figure out how do we do this. We need to build greater community acceptance for this type of work. And we need to manage the iron kernels in our own systems to allow that for us to do it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Look, we really are up against time, so I'm sorry we're not going to be able to jump into Q&A. I had one last question that I really desperately want to try and turn into a lightning round, so we can go for a yes or no answer or a one sentence at the most. We've all talked about how much there is to do. We're all doing a lot, but there's still so much to do. The risk of task saturation and diffusion of effort is great. Shout out to ASPI's Critical Tech Tracker. What it does that I think is particularly useful is start to identify some of those areas where perhaps we need to invest to catch up and to achieve the advantages that we are all looking for. And we can also, to Hugh's point, start to understand what a division of labour might look like. But this issue of prioritising, when there are so many things to do, have we solved this problem? Literally, yes or no, Vice Minister, to you first. Or are we close to solving it?
Thank you. I think you outlined the key challenge here, and the prioritization is something we think about every day. And in our case, and in frontline states case and small states case, I think that's first of all prioritization about the traditional, conventional, because you still need to close the gaps, but simultaneously equally trying to invest into technologies, into R&D, into the future. So how you combine that?
Yeah, thank you.
And that's the key challenge, to prioritize.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us so early in the morning. Appreciate it. Hugh, a quick one from you?
Look, no, I don't think we've sort of the prioritisation challenge. And it's particularly challenging in government because you have departments and then you have the political system. And departments can choose to prioritise until such time as ministers say, well, no, this is a priority, and and with change in governments, you have change in priorities. So it is a real problem.
Yeah.
But I do think that the change in our strategic circumstances is a really useful reminder that we need to do better at taking advantage of our limited defence budget, the envelope that government affords us, and to do better with it. So we don't have a choice, but I think this is going to be an ongoing issue around how do we focus and how do we be ruthless enough, and how do you ensure that you get sufficient consensus to take painful decisions, because prioritisation really means taking painful decisions to kill off programs and projects, and you'll find that there'll be plenty of people that will want to speak out if their project's been killed. Yeah.
Abe?
I would say that prioritization is a critical thing that you're never done with. That you're never done evaluating your priorities, reevaluating your priorities. I started working in the Department of Defense when the top priorities for the United States were in Afghanistan and Iraq. Yeah. And I was focused on China and the PLA, which was definitely not a priority. Yeah. We were a small but merry band of China specialists. So I'd say that we're much better now than we have been in the past. But last personal experience, I spent the last 2 years working for Secretary Alston and seeing him every day having to prioritize between the largest land war in Europe since the end of World War II, the potential for the outbreak of general war in the Middle East, and the reactions to the tragedies of October in Israel, and then making sure that the Indo-Pacific, what we say in our public documents is the pacing challenge for the Department of Defense. How do you prioritize in terms of investments? How do you prioritize in terms of time that you spend on it? And how do you prioritize in terms of your operational, your tactical, your investments over time? I think we're a lot better than we have been in the past, but I still think it's an unending process. You never get to good.
Okay. Yep. James.
We chose 7. And that's what we're doing.
Yep.
So we're moving through them quite methodically, and then when one has been mainstreamed, like we started with data, that was, we had to get that ball rolling. But now it's been mainstreamed across the organization, and it's well understood, and it's in the processes. We moved that off the list, we added a new one. So we basically stick with 7, and we prioritize and work it through. So, the risk is, the Korean movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once. And
Yep.
if you do everything at the same time, you're not prioritizing anything. But so we had to choose, and we chose.
Yep.
So we're feeling okay about that.
Hard choices, hard choices. If you'd like to hear a little bit more from Abe, he's going to be joining me at ASPE next Monday the 9th for a fireside chat. So another opportunity to dig into some of this stuff, but please join me in thanking all of these terrific panellists